Back we are with Holy Paladin, back and strong, and it still has holy power. But you need to embrace it because it's actually not that bad. Aside from covenants, not else changed since our last take on the holy boy. But this time we got the chance to test legendaries as well, and oh, there are conduits too. A fresh new opinion for a fresh new Holy Paladin that you too can get your hands on come Shadowlands. You can catch us play these specs in advance on our stream at twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline. Yep, we playtest everything we put into our videos, and we usually do these with you guys, if you have the beta. If not, once we are back on live, we will run dungeons and raids as per usual, and in any case, it's just super fun to see me struggle to heal with Holy Paladin with a strength weapon. That never happened. Onwards! With that out of the way, Holy is still the only Paladin spec where Judgment does not generate a holy power, which I guess it's fine, since you generate it by healing the target of your beacon of light anyway. Let's talk about that for a second. Holy power, that is. The spec did indeed revert back to a builder-spender type spec, where the spenders of your holy power will heal tremendously. Word of Glory is the single target variant, which heals for a bit more than a holy light and is instant with no mana cost. Seeing as how Crusader Strike has a mana cost right now, mana will once again start to be a problem. And since we mentioned Holy Light, Infusion of Light is one of the bigger changes that we have not covered last time. It still procs off of Holy Shock Crit, but this time reduces the cost of Flash of Light by 50% and increases the healing of your Holy Light by 50%. This is a pretty big change, since Glimmer may no longer be the cookie cutter build that you might actually care about your procs of Infusion now, so you can maximize your throughput. The cast time of Holy Light is real this time around, but so is the healing, where with Infusion proccing, it will heal for more than a Word of Glory. It takes a while to get used to the cast time, and it might become a thing where the choice in which to cast Flash or Holy comes down to how often you need to move. For all its faults, I actually think Holy Power would be an ideal thing and in an ideal spot if at least Word of Glory would be off the GCD. Holy Paladin is a reactive healer, and its biggest hits come from building and spending on instant heals, and then being on the global cooldown really hinders the whole feel of the Holy Power system. Prot and Red are on the same boat really, since the heal is a reactive response, and we already know this talk about the GCD. Nothing new. We want Word of Glory off the GCD! We want Word of Glory off the GCD! Divine Toll did not change. You can still go to the Bastion Covenant, the Kyrians, and get this sweet baby for some nice synergy between it and Glimmer. If anything, this is an almost guaranteed proc of Infusion of Light, since you hit 5 targets with Holy Shock, and that just means that any one of those can crit. It has good synergy with Beacon of Virtue builds for all you folk who dislike the melee din when it comes to healing. Other than that, it heals for a bit, can be used offensively as well, but probably your biggest gain out of it is the up to 5 holy power generation on demand that makes it be a global away from an emergency Word of Glory. Moving to Maldraxes, Vanquisher's Hammer is still the same, a bit awkward, especially since it eats a holy power, and we discussed the value of it in our Prot Pala video. It's even less so maybe for Holy Paladin, valuable that is, since it makes your next Word of Glory proc a Light of Dawn, which is insignificant or at least incredibly demanding, since not only do you spend the holy power on the hammer for damage, you also have to position yourself for the Light of Dawn to get use out of it. It's essentially a 1 holy power cost Light of Dawn every 30 seconds if you play around it. It's definitely an increase to your throughput, but debatable if it's any close to the other options. Blessings of the Seasons did actually change though, and it's one of the biggest changes affecting Holy Paladin. They still retain their functionality of rotating through the seasons. This time they last for 30 seconds and have a 45-second cooldown. Blessing of Spring increases healing done and received by the affected target. This clearly works for you or for a Blood Decay or a Prot Paladin in your group if you plan on sharing it. Blessing of Summer makes attacks have a 40% chance to deal 30% additional damage as holy damage. This is clearly something you want to use on your best DPS in the group to maximize group performance. Maybe high haste DPS? Blessing of Autumn makes cooldowns recover 30% faster. I suppose this works well for you since Holy is essentially a cooldown based healer, particularly if you talent yourself that way. And lastly, Blessing of Winter makes attacks deal extra frost damage and reduce the movement speed and attack speed of the enemy by 3 and 2% respectively, stacking up to 10 times. If used properly, this can reduce the amount of attacks your tank is taking or help build up towards a situation where your tank can kite. And lastly, Ashen Hollow has been buffed as well. Whatever initial state it had, now it's still a big ass 4-minute cooldown that lasts for 30 seconds. It will heal allies and damage enemies for quite a bit during that time, scaling down with the number of targets affected. The radius is pretty big, and even if you need to move around in the fight, the space it offers should be more than enough to be in it. For its cooldown, this does indeed offer a lot of power. It's just that a 4-minute cooldown just doesn't feel right in modern WoW. Fights and engages are meant to be either fast-paced and back-to-back if we're talking about M+, which with the AoE cap you cannot even pull more to make full use out of it, or bosses, making it seem clearly a boss cooldown for which you really only can use it once unless you just pop it at the start and not use it in any way defensively possible, because if you do use it on cooldown you won't be aiming to get reactionary value out of it to match it with, let's say, a boss phase that will damage your whole group, which almost never happens in the first 30 to 60 seconds of a fight, so that's already a minute gone. This reminds me of Holy Word Salvation from Holy Priest, a big ass cooldown that you could work into increasing uptime if only to reduce the effectiveness of each individual cast. The talents haven't changed much since we last looked at the spec. Saved by the Light is still an underwhelming choice. To get actual value out of it, you would have to micromanage your beacon on the group, so it will increase your throughput, which with it being on the GCD, you really don't want to do that often or ever. Holy is already a spec with a heavy global cooldown requirement, long casted holy lights, cooldowns and utility to activate. There isn't really a place yet to swap beacon on people, so especially for an incredibly small absorb for how intense you have to be to do this. It absorbs for a bit less than 2 holy lights, and it might even have a 2 GCD cost requirement of moving it away from your target once the absorb is procced. It's just weird. Take beacon off the GCD, then we'll talk. Aside the talents moving around, if you haven't seen our initial Holy Paladin coverage, Holy Avenger is now back to generating triple the holy power, meaning that this changes your playstyle and builds that are coming from BFA. It will make Glimmer a whole different build. Holy Avenger not giving haste anymore means you will use it for massive Words of Glory spams, and with that, Holy Shock will lose one of its biggest cooldown reduction mechanics. Seraphim has been updated to provide flat percentage increases to stats, probably due to the stat diminishing returns they added some time ago as well. Glimmer is still a talent and the build is still fun and viable, at least in the lowish Mythic Plus dungeons I did with the current eye level gear available on beta. It will be played differently, and to be honest, I find it a lot more fun and engaging where you are not just spamming the same very few buttons as in BFA. As with any class, Paladin has 4 general class-wide legendaries it can use and 4 for each spec individually. One noteworthy mention is the Relentless Inquisitor legendary. Oh, I know it's a red legendary, but works for Holy as well, and I imagine for Prot also. This makes the Glimmer build playable and just seems to mash together with the Holy power system. I bet this is a bug, that it works cross-spec, or at the very least not intended. We had Azurite traits in BFA that worked for specs they were not intended for for years and they never fixed that. Was it because it was BFA? Was it because they actually thought it was okay and didn't really want to go through the hassle of making them class-wide available? Who knows, but if the same mentality carries over, it could make this particular Lego be pretty impactful for Glimmer playstyles and, all playstyles. Inflorescence of the Sunwell makes Infusion of Light proc with 2 charges and a 20% boost to its effectiveness. In terms of raw throughput, this seems to really pump. Essentially, you get a free and buffed Holy Light ever 2 procs consumed on Holy Lights. Mathematically anyway. Actually, the same for Flash of Light as well, since you cast 2 with more than 50% reduction to their cost. This could be the Mana Management Legendary? Maraud's Dying Breath is an interesting option here. Baseline Martyr heals for a bit less than a Holy Light, and it is instant, damaging you for 50% of the healing. Increase its healing means increasing the damage you take also. The problem is that the fundamental mechanic of Martyr goes against the healer mentality. Putting yourself in danger is a big no-no and a bad habit to build around, and one that could cost you your group. So this turns out into how much healing it is really worth to put yourself in danger for. The everything has a price mentality, where if you can 0 to 100 an ally with the cost, maybe it's worth half your HP. But even that sounds horrible, since if you do end up dying, it doesn't really matter if the target survives, since everybody else will die anyway. Theoretically. Maybe if the legendary also reduced the amount of damage transferred to you, then maybe. Right now, probably not a progression or content pushing option. Shadowbreaker Dawn of the Sun makes Light of Dawn have a 40-yard range and buff targets to receive 20% extra healing from you for 6 seconds. This sounds like a raid legendary, and it makes me think that Vanquisher Summer, that one that gives you a free Light of Dawn, could be good, but probably not. AoE healing is still shit outside Glimmer or Beacon of Virtue. Pair them up though, and with Rule of Law you could take care of your entire raid, as in reach everyone properly. Shock Barrier might revive Glimmer builds where Holy Shock leaves an absorb shield for 18 seconds on up to 3 total targets at once. Since Holy Shock will not have that ridiculous low cooldown from BFA, it will at least provide some absorb throughput. This sounds like it could easily become a good option in dungeons, and as long as numbers will keep getting tuned, we are just looking at the mechanic and potential uptime, which right now is a bit Maybe I'm wrong. If you don't know by now, soulbinds are essentially NPCs that interact with your character by providing you with a pseudo talent tree. You can build their traits the way you want to, unlocking a specific combination of conduits along the way. For example, Clea could be a good holy conduit since she has pointed courage that seems to have been made for holy paladins, since your entire healing toolkit wants you to be close to your allies, and even transforms all of those crits with valiant strikes into free AoE healing. And this is just from the Kyrians. Maldraxes has a similar soulbind in the Bonesmith with his arsenal Marrow Gemstone that can give you 20% crit chance for 20 seconds after critting 10 times. Although this is limited at once per minute, 20% crit chance, if you can have a modicum control over it, is essentially a cooldown. In your case, a defensive cooldown, where you could play into first a lot of healing and second into Infusion of Light procs. Although maybe not the best, Nia from the Night Fae has Nia's tools, Herbs. Healing a target has a chance to increase their haste by 2% for 20 seconds. This changes the dynamic a bit and clearly installs a help your group mentality even more. Not sure what the chance is, but hey, 2% haste for 20 seconds, pretty good. Venthyr doesn't seem at first glance to offer anything for healers that's noteworthy. Aside Soothing Shade from Theotar, which is a mastery boost if you stay in it, you could opt for Nadia for her Thrill Seeker option that gives you 20% haste every so often while in combat. That holds the same argument as the crit option, except this you can monitor and predict when it procs, although cannot really control it. And of course, all of these can further be decided upon based on what conduits you want to unlock. Getting the potency ones will probably be a goal, since that's where the healing boost will be. Enkindled Spirit brings some Light of Dawn love, but really just makes Aura Mastery add more AoE healing to your group. It's not bad, but doesn't really accomplish the same goal as Arrow Mastery, which wants damage prevented, not healed. And Light of Dawn is well, Light of Dawn. Group needs to be stacked or you use the 40R raid legendary, so go for it. Focus Light increases the crit chance of Holy Shock, which is probably an insta-lock for most content, with any build really. While Untempered Dedication resurfaces my previous point about Light of the Martyr. It might be good. Who knows, really, no joke, it's just not something we are used to as healers. But Blizz really wants us to shoot ourselves in the foot to save that dumbass's face. All in all, I was pleasantly surprised to see how fun Holy it is to play. Is it perfect? Never from some people's point of view, and that is fair. I enjoyed Glimmer way more than BFA, and Beacon of Virtue is always fun to play with, especially with all the legendaries and conduits you can gain access to. My main concern remains with the GCD system. Since haste will no longer be found in such high amounts, I really hope Blizzard considers taking the spenders off the GCD, since most of the time building Holy Power is already costing you globals you wouldn't really want to use to make the spenders justify their value. I think the extra GCD for Word of Glory and Light of Dawn is maybe too taxing. I'm fine if the healing is reduced as long as it's off the GCD. But what do you think in the comments though? And a special thank you to our patrons. Thank you for supporting our content. We are super happy that you like what we do. Don't stress, because all of the support you guys are giving us obviously are paying the bills and for me to eat. Does Marcelian eat? I don't think so. But anyway, we really do appreciate it, and it goes into us increasing the quality of our content and doing new things like the podcast, which you should check. And if you, dear viewer, also want to support us a little bit more, the link to our Patreon is down below, together with our merch. Yeah, check this out, the Jayla! Marcelian actually hand drew these graffiti style artworks that we have for you to get if you like some of these stuff, so go check them out. Thank you for watching the video, stay awesome, and we'll see you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.